So, hey everybody, this is, I think, the second interview we're doing. Um, it's a little bit of a kind of mess because obviously coronavirus has muddled all our heads up. But I'm actually, this is probably one of the ones I'm most excited about, no offense to anybody else, but this is because me and Claude, we're family without the blood. And actually, we've joked about possibly being family, considering how close our parents were at one point. So yeah, we have questions for our parents as to whether actually maybe we are family. No, we're not.
Oh God!
But yeah, me and Claude have known each other essentially from birth, and then we had a bit of a kind of break of knowing each other from sort of, I don't know how old, like we didn't see a lot of each other from about sort of 10 to like 20.
Well, it's almost 10 years.
Yeah. And it was kind of, we both obviously regret it because we're not quite sure why that was the case.
I think a big part of it was different parts of Sydney.
Yeah, for sure. I guess so. But then, not really, because I was also not just in Bondi. I was in Newtown for such. It's ridiculous that we didn't bump into each other. Yeah. Yeah, nothing. But obviously, yeah. For the last few years, me and Claude lived together you were with us for like 9 months.
Yeah, around then, probably 8 months, 9 months.
Yeah, and we're family. So, but as well as family, Claude and I share many kind of interests in all forms of art, all forms of talking about political and social issues and things that we both disagree with and agree with each other on, which I think is always part of a good, healthy relationship and friendship, really. And obviously we come from very, very similar, the same place in Sydney, which, I think is probably a good first thing to talk about. So, I mean, one thing I didn't ask you yesterday, which I think is sort of I'm coming around to now, is that how important Sydney and how important Australia is for me, not just working wise, but just from a kind of worldview perspective, what it changes and what it makes you think about when you look at things coming from Australia. And being raised in, I don't mean raised in nature in the like hippie way, but I think Australians are very much closer to nature than possibly a lot of other European countries, certainly the big cities. So what do you think that's had a big impact?
I think that I do completely. I think that there's a part of growing up in Australia where you are innately connected to the land in some way. I mean, you kind of can't help it. I think it's a living, breathing thing. I think that we all have some connection to it. I mean, I not that doesn't happen here. I just think that it's a very different beast.
I mean, the difference being that
and I think depending on
our indigenous culture is so. I mean, not that they teach enough of it, and they certainly don't. But obviously, Australia's indigenous culture and a lot of basically all of the foundations of our history are built on this thing of dream time and the relationship to the landscape and things like that. So, I guess from that perspective, it's probably more.
Well, I think our arts is deeply ingrained in that land. I think I think for some time it has been about. That's the conversation that we're having in our art is with our land and our place in it. But I think that's always changing and shifting. But I think that is, to some degree, what the constant conversation is.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, like, when other people go to Australia, they usually start taking, like, photos or doing paintings of the landscape. It's not, it's like, it's sort of impossible not to have some sort of influence.
Or some response to it. I think that it's the same thing. I mean, it's funny I've just been to Greece for the first time, and it was a really interesting thing. I went with family, and your godfather, my father, he is a set designer, and it was really interesting, like, seeing him respond to the land there, because he was saying, no wonder so many incredible, rich stories came from this land, because it's a response to the land. I mean, you go to some of these places in Greece, and you can see how you would look at that piece of land, and you can see the story that has come from that, because it asks you to do that. It's really, and I think that that's what we want to do to it. That's the response that we're getting from looking at something like that. And I think I find it the same in Australia. I think that not develop some sort of dialogue with the land. I think that, and that wherever you're coming from, I think that you would come to Australia and you would see it, and it does ignite that in people in some way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, it's a different place. It's like, even just the light is so much more harsh. And that, even just that makes a huge difference. But it's interesting, you just talk, I mean, we'll come back to this, because I think we should kind of circle around talking about things and then go on to the project. But it's interesting talking about Greece and Australia, because obviously, the Minotaur is a Greek myth, it's a mythological story. So, and that it's interesting to talk about Australia.
Well, there you go. Greece. You picked something there. I mean, I think that's certainly a big part. I think that's our job I mean, even just on a really basic level, we're storytellers, whether that is, whatever. I mean, whatever you are as an artist, I think we are storytellers. And I think that land does that, history does it, culture, like whatever it is, we're interacting with it in some way. And for me, it would be I think that so much about who I am as an artist comes from responding to land in some way, and stories that have come from that. So
yeah, absolutely. So going back to just coming from there, obviously you're talking about your dad and being a set designer and growing up in I should actually say that Claude's now a working actor, and so
just about
as well as as much as anybody is working at the moment, but and then obviously you went to a performing arts school, which we were just saying you don't think it necessarily specifically impacted you in so it didn't change your life going to a performing arts school, but that there was obviously influences and things like that. So what was I guess simultaneously what was growing up with your dad's world and being introduced to all the people and kind of craziness of that, and going to a performing arts school, and how do you think that sort of affected your perspective on things?
Right. Well, I think that is, I mean, I'm doing what I do now because of all of this thing. I think, like you would understand, I think growing up in that environment, it was like I grew up in a bubble. I grew up in that world. He's a set designer for theatre, and I think from a very young age, I grew up in a small group of artists that work together, and time, it was mainly my first sort of 10 years, I just remember being in the opera house. It's kind of like all my memories surround that place. And that came from, my father, my godfather, who's a lighting designer, and then other dear family really now. I mean, Elke Neidhart, who's an incredible German-Australian director, and then my godmother, Jenny Tate, she was a costume designer. So those four have influenced me like endless. I mean, they still to this day form a constant. I mean, as I was going back to what I was saying before, it's this constant dialogue that you're having with the world. And I think that they started that question. Do you know what I mean? They opened that conversation up for me from a very small human that I was. And
I guess it allowed you like a safety net as well. Is that thing, I think a lot of people, and this includes professional working artists, but still a lot of people feel that, it's quite scary to put yourself out there in a kind of creatively expressive way. I feel like when you've grown up around it, there's this sort of assumption that like that's kind of what you're meant to do, and so it sort of feels
it's funny. It's funny that you say that. I don't think that it ever felt like a taxing thing to be an artist. Like, I don't think there was ever a period where I went, God, this is going to be hard. Like, I wonder, and that gift that I was given, and I'm incredibly lucky for it. But I think I don't think there was ever a period where that wasn't going to be something that I was going to do. I mean, whether that was, I think I was sort of raised to be that. But that's why, I certainly don't think it was ever going to be in film or television. That's that's my kind of, I had to sit everyone down and be like, guys, I'm gonna act. And everyone was that's the kind of, what? You're gonna be but I think it was definitely sure. But like, that's what I'm saying. I mean, they started the dialogue of what it is, what's our role as an artist, what is it to be one, and I do think they instilled some level of, there is a need for it in our society. And I think also these are four people that came from different parts of the world. I mean, they were four really crucial members of the Australian arts, but like they also had very, fascinating backgrounds. I mean, a lot of them were tied to Europe, and I think they brought that culture to the Australian arts, and that was what was so beautiful and incredible about their work, was that it opened up Australia to the world in some way. But I think, I don't know, I think that in some way they instilled some deep desire to follow through with that. And I still feel like that I constantly go back to conversations that I would have with them when I was a child, and I think it's going to always be something that I have. And more than anything else, I think it started for me the question of like, certainly in theatre, it's about, you address a space. You're acknowledging a space, whether you're dressing that space, if it's a visually creative thing, or whether you're making that space as a director, or whether you're inhabiting that space as an actor. And I think all of those fronts were addressed at a young age, and that was the gift that I was given. And I think there is a constant dialogue between those different ways of looking at that space.
Yeah, definitely.
Which sounds a bit mad, but
No, no, I agree. I agree. I mean, it's interesting
Yeah.
because I've never had any, any sort of real experience with theatre. I mean, obviously I've seen plays and what have you, but never, and did school plays, but never really. So I think that's like the one area where, we're talking to you about it is a kind of total,
But it's also interesting because that is your background. I mean, for everyone who doesn't like,
yeah,
your mother was in theatre,
yeah,
and your family,
yeah,
your grandfather too. So it's like that is a world that you're from.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that totally. And I've got two cousins who are both, dancers and
Yeah.
but the stage.
Who worked with my father. It's all very.
Yeah, who worked with your dad. But like, I think, you're right. The stage is definitely, it's definitely a kind of has been in my family. I think that the thing is though is that, like, for me, I never sort of saw it as a, and you probably disagree with me on this, but I kind of never saw it as like a different thing to, like, making a film is just another form of stage. Actually, no, you won't disagree with that. It's just like, it's in a different environment, obviously. But I never kind of thought of the stage as being particularly an important thing. It was just one place where you did that thing that you do. You know what I mean? And then there's kind of every.
No, I think I do disagree.
Right.
I do and I don't, because I think that it is a different medium. I find them very different beasts.
Yeah.
And I think the pursuit is the same. I think that it is, you can still put that analogy of like this idea of a dressing space and whatever that means. I think that is the same thing in film. And that's why I can find a love for it, because I think it is some way of engaging with that, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I do think that's a similarity, but I do think that like theatre is the most immediate way to experience
definitely
art in that sense. I can't, that will never get shifted. I do think that it's changing. Whatever that means is changing, and it doesn't fit in our world in the same way that it did 50, 100 years ago. Like, that is changing. But I do think it will always be the most immediate way to experience art in that sense, because where else, maybe music, I mean, there are others, music, dance, that is a way of, where else is the performer engaging with the audience and that's generating the work?
Directly. Yeah.
Like, that's not the same with film. I mean,
no.
Yes, there's a complete cutoff there. Like, the performance that I'm giving is not being read by an audience when I'm doing it. Like, it's just, and in that sense, I do see them as very separate things.
I don't mean that though as that they're the same. You're not doing the same thing. All I mean is that, and this doesn't just, I don't just mean this within acting, but that, closest thing I can talk about is, if I go out and take photos, or if I'm on, in a studio or whatever, in a way that's sort of like also the stage, and that's where you do. Yeah, sorry, that's sort of what I mean.
And if we start talking about the stage as a space, you can translate it to all sorts of different, because it's the exact same thing as taking a photo. Like, as soon as you are seeing your subject matter, you're engaging with it, and
and that's the sort of performance side of.
Your tool's different. Your tool is different.
The tool is totally different.
You're still having the same dialogue with that subject matter,
but just in a totally different way, or through a totally different way. Yeah,
it's different media, different tools, different like different craft. But I think the conversation is still the same.
Yeah, was that, and this sort of perfectly leads into what we were talking about the other day, which is what obviously you've been listening to a lot of food, or watching a lot of food programs, and listening to a lot of food podcasts. Yeah, and it's that same thing. I mean, I think I would say, like, most people don't think of chefs or being a chef as a sort of artist, it's I mean, I don't even know what you would describe chefing. I don't know what. I mean, I would probably call it a sort of expression, but I don't think it necessarily falls into like art with a capital A.
I think it does.
Right.
Because I think at the end of the day, it is still craftsmanship.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, would you call... I do find them one and the same, because I think if you're a sculptor, it's the same thing as being a cook. I don't find there's a difference there. You're still making something for someone to experience and react to and respond to. Your tools and the material is, I mean, could not be more different. But I do actually think that, I mean, maybe not for everyone, but I think that I think it is still a vocation, and it is still a way of like, it's that same thing. You don't become a chef for money. You don't become...
No, definitely not.
I mean, I think if you ask any chef, they're going to say, I'm doing it to like feed people and make them happy and get them to have a response to what I'm giving them. It's about like giving someone something and like giving them an experience. And then that's, or you getting a reaction to something that you're giving them that makes you feel something. Like, I think that you're doing it because of a vocational thing, rather than like, you're not doing it in a business. I mean, not for everyone. I can't speak for everyone, but that's the same with every artist. I'm doing it for different reasons. But I don't find there's a difference there. I think that, and that music is endless and it can go beyond just being a chef. But I find it very similar worlds. And I think for me, what I'm finding really interesting at the moment is like, it's of, I think the conversation I'm having a lot at the moment with friends is, what is that state that you're chasing when you're doing this? Whether it's you taking a photo, or if it's me when I'm acting, or if it's someone who's painting, or whatever it is, whatever they're doing, what is that state that when we get into a state and we kind of plow through, it's this, and we're addicted to it. It's this addictive personality thing that comes with being an artist. Like, what is that? Like, I'm questioning that a lot at the moment. And I mean, for me, I found it watching chefs, like it's that sweet spot of when you're when you're in service and it's like pressure's on, you plow through, nothing stops, like everything is that service, and it becomes like almost this state of mind that you have to put yourself in to like get through it. And I think that's the addictive part of it. That's the bit that you do it. You get into that space and you plow through. And I think it's a thing that you come back to every night. Like, it's torture for them. Complete torture. You've got heat everywhere. The pressure is, I mean, it's terrifying to me, but like, you look at it and you're like, you're torturing yourselves. And yet they come back every single night, and it has to be because it's addictive in some way. Because why torture yourself? And it's the same with every walk of like, why, if you're a fucking struggling artist, why are you doing it? Like, there's some addictive side to it, and that state. And it got me thinking, that state of being in service and having to like, I'm comparing that to what I do and what like people around me. I'm finding it a really interesting thing to think about.
But having, I mean, I've worked in, quite a few kitchens just from having odd jobs after school, and it is definitely that thing of you live and die by your service, and and I mean, look, I didn't feel that because I was doing the the horrible jobs in the kitchen, so I for money, but you see the chefs and you talk to them obviously, and it is that very obsessive thing, which I think is, I agree. I think it's really similar in many forms of practitioner's kind of process of work. But I think my thing with food and is, you know, even just from the fact that, okay, this might be a bit of a trivial thing to say, but because it's quite an old-fashioned word, just happens to still be used. You know, even just the word service is, you know, that's what they do. Is that being a chef is a service, and okay, it's a luxury as well. You know, I think obviously going out for dinner is more of a luxury than the necessity to eat food. But do you think, you know, I think that with chefs, so much of it matters. And again, I'm massively generalizing saying this, and it's not that everybody, not every chef thinks that. But, you know, obviously chefs make food for other people, and it is very much about their what they're getting from other people eating their food. Whereas I'm not sure. I mean, I think that there is a part of you know, if you want to say an artist's workflow, that having other people experience your work is really, really important. But I don't think it's as sort of prevalent in say a painter's world as it would be a chef. And so, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that
well, what do you think the difference is? I think that certainly a painter has there isn't a it's complicated because I think people do what they do for different reasons. So I am generalizing, but I think you're a chef because you want to give someone an experience, you want to make them feel something.
Right.
You're there to make them feel something. I think that it is the same with painting.
Yeah.
I think that but it doesn't need to. This is the thing that I do want to be clear about is it doesn't necessarily have to be for someone else, though. I think that because you can paint for you can paint to make yourself feel something. I think normally you are painting to make someone else feel something.
Yeah.
But I don't want to limit it to that. I do think that it becomes more complicated than that. But I think generally, I think artists are that's what they are chasing. They're trying to make someone feel something.
Yeah.
But I think that the chase is the thing that they do it for. I don't think you think that 100%. You can do it to get a response from someone, but I think that certainly for me, it has become like the chase is why I do it.
And so a response from, say, whether it's audience or viewer or whoever, it's a consideration, but it's not a focal point. It's a you know, like, so I mean, just from my point of view, I like showing people my photos, just whether it's to get like a response or, you know, critical feedback or whatever the reason. But I think that's sort of part of my kind of process of enjoying the response that it elicits in other people. But I don't go, oh, that's like the reason I'm doing it. I just go, oh, no, that's like, it's a consideration to make, but it's not it's not like a driving force or anything like that, which I guess you could say the same about chefing.
I know, and it does become complicated there because I do think at the end of the day they are there to make someone feel something or give someone an experience. But yes, you are right that a lot of artists aren't doing it for that. But I think that I think that there is a similarity there because I think with a chef you could also be like, yeah, but like surely you must enjoy the process because it is such like it's so intense and it's
it's the most brutal thing.
But then I do think that if I sat you down and I was like, why do you do what you do? It is for you, but I do think that you are there to contribute to the world and ask questions because you want to change people's mind.
Yeah.
You know, or you want to challenge them. I know that you do, and I know that most artists do. Like, however much you want to, like, so there I find no difference. There I think it is the same.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get that satisfaction with what I do. I'm not behind a camera and getting any sort of response from an audience whatsoever. That is just not a part of because it's not a part of what I do, it does become like, but I do what I do for then that show to invoke some sort of response from someone.
Right.
I'm doing it to give someone an escape, to make them question something, like whatever. That is the end game, but I certainly don't experience that when I'm doing it. Theatre's different. I do experience it when I'm doing it. So it's, I think I'm just sort of saying that I'm seeing some sort of, I do see a lot of similarities between these different vocations.
Yeah.
And they are so different, but I think that, you know, I think they are very similar. But I do think the thing that it has been, it's this addictive personality thing that I think has been really funny to think about, because I think, you know, I think there's a big part of, do you have to put yourself in a particular mindset?
Sorry, Claude, just say that again. It cut out for a second. So just say that again, because it went a bit fuzzy.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Do you have to put yourself in a particular mindset to do good work?
Oh, look, I mean, good work in the sense of like hard work, or how do you mean?
Okay, no. When you are doing your best work, is it because you are in a very particular mindset?
No, definitely.
Okay, that's not what you have to. Do you think that you have to work in a? Is there a state of mind that you are in when you are working?
Yeah. I mean, I think that God, that is actually a hard question to answer, because you kind of don't. But the point is that I sort of don't. I'm never that aware of sort of what I'm. I mean, you're aware. Well, I shouldn't say you. I'm aware, but I'm also kind of blissfully unaware of what I'm doing, just because it's sort of like it's just kind of happening in a way, and I'm obviously controlling my body and my actions. So, like a good example is, you know, last year I went to New York for 2 weeks purely just to take photos, and you know, and so I kind of made like a regiment for myself to go, right, like get up at you know, sunrise, go out and just spend hours on end taking as many photos as you can, with a certain mindset, kind of, or inner monologue going on at the same time as to what things I was looking for and things I was aware of.
It's like hunting.
What's that? Yeah, I mean, look, photography is.
You're putting yourself in. I cannot imagine that isn't some level of like having to put yourself in a certain state of mind, because you're actively, whether it's switching off or whatever you call it, you are having to like actively pursue something.
Yeah, look, undoubtedly, but I think what I wouldn't say that it's like it's a switch. It's certainly not a switch where I go flick on what like work, and you know, like I can sit and watch a fucking television show, you know, drinking a beer or whatever, and something will just ping into my head. You know, like it can be the smallest thing or the largest thing, of whether it's something in the show or I just get distracted by thinking or something, and all of a sudden that will kind of like ignite ideas of something I've got to do. So it's not like, you know, it's not that thing of going, right, there's work and then there's kind of life that goes on outside of that. It's for me, certainly it's like it's a sort of constant questioning of things where you go like, oh, what could that be used for? What could and I think obviously there's times where you don't do that, and there's times where you do it more. So I don't know if that answers your question with a yes or no answer. It's sort of somewhere in between yes and no.
Would you say that it's an addictive thing? I mean, you're actually just talking about having. That's actually just more about having some level of like. I don't know whether that is.
I don't know if it's addictive because you sort of don't know that people who are addicted to things don't know that they're addicted to them. You know, it's like you kind of just do them because you really, really want to. And
yeah,
I think there's different, you know, you can be more addicted to certain things than others. Like, you know, if you're putting together a book that is a really kind of personal project, or, you know, I'm sure it's the same if you're doing an acting job where the story is very, very personal to you, you're just by nature gonna want to do more work or be more in it. Whereas, you know, if you're doing, you know, something that's commissioned that is like a, you know, just for money or just for this or for that, you know, there's not that sort of same drive for. But again, I can't say that because there's probably things that you'll find in those things that you don't want to do as much, where you go like, oh yeah, remember when I did that? 3 years later, it somehow. I'm very much of the opinion that everything's connected. Sort of like what you were saying before with chef food and.
I know. I feel like the more you start questioning it, you actually just see that there is parallels between everything. Like
to the point where you go like, oh yeah, banking is like the highest form.
I know.
Of art.
I had that when we were. I know. I did. I was always going to be like, it's like a florist.
Like, yeah. So
it's everything. It's all connected. I guess I'm.
Yeah. No.
I guess my thing is that the thing that I think the thing that I'm finding interesting is that, like, I'll go to work and I feel like I go in and the second I get to work or I'm on my way to work, I'm mentally preparing myself or putting myself in a very particular state of mind, and it's something to do with I'm like ready to go, and it's some mental game where I'm having to just basically switch on, and because there's no kind of I could be sitting down and like having lunch, and then 5 minutes later I'm like on set and and they're calling action. Like you kind of have to be ready from when you arrive. And for me, look, I don't know if I really don't. This might not be everybody's experience, but for me, I need to turn up in a particular headspace because I can't just like walk into it. I can't do that. I need to. I think I've noticed in my work that I need to turn up, and sort of my mind needs to be ready to go the second they call me on. And I'll like get home and be exhausted and have done like 2 things that day, and I'll be like, why am I so exhausted? And I think that it's because you're having to like keep yourself in a very particular headspace for the whole day, and that is exhausting. It's mentally really taxing, and I think I find it the only way to describe what that feels like, because it is an energy. It's not just like I have focus now. It's like you have to have enough energy to push you in a scene, and I need to stay in that energy all day. And it's the same, I would imagine. The only time that I have seen it in another, I experience it if I'm painting or if I'm drawing, that's fine. But like to actually point it out another person's job and be like, oh, I know what that feels like. It's the service when you're a chef. When I watch them call service and it's like from the start to the end, it's like if you back down from that pace for like a second, you're fucked.
Mm.
And I know it is different, but I find it feels the same for me. Like if I switch off, like, I mean, I don't know if I'm making much sense here. I'm maybe
no, I get that. I agree. I mean, I think a lot of people think and feel that way and work that way. And definitely there's elements of that I completely understand, because definitely I do that. Like, you know, if you're writing something, headspace is, you know, you need to be in a certain frame of mind depending on what you're writing, just because otherwise, you know, it's a focus thing. And so for sure, there's yeah, I can't disagree at all with that.
I mean, look, I'm being a bit. I mean, I'm talking quite.
No,
if all I have to do in one day is just be in the background, then I don't necessarily feel like that feels the same. But if I have 4 scenes and they're all tearing me in different ways emotionally or whatever, I can't just turn up and be like, yeah, fuck it, let's just jump in all of them. I think I need to be ready. And like it's that sort of being on your toes and ready. It's like that feeling before a race when you're like waiting for them to call the gun, and you're it's that feeling for like 12 hours. That's a very weird thing to. It's addictive, but it kills you. Like you get to I'm finding it a very new thing with this new part of my life. Is why do I enjoy that? Because it's kind of fucked. Like there's a part of it that is very strange. But like, why do I find that so addictive? Is that, and it's adrenaline. I guess it is as a part of it that you can be like, well, that is chemical that you are addicted to it. But it's very bizarre.
In those terms, in terms of talking about addictiveness, I would say I'm sort of addicted with finding out things rather than. You know, it is. You're right. It is a total adrenaline rush of doing what you do, and it's really exciting.
Exactly. And I would say that it's the same thing with you and taking photos.
Yeah,
I could be so surprised if it wasn't.
No, and definitely, and there's. I mean, you know, especially when you're taking photos, sort of just in daily life, and you know, you can run into seriously weird situations, but I do understand the addictive side of it. I think for also where, say, our two interests are different is that you know, I think acting, you are right, you know, and you're with a team of people constantly. And so in a way, there's also that thing of going, right, you know, I need to be in this sort of zone in order to kind of obviously produce what I need to produce for me, as well as for a director or for a whoever. Whereas, and I think that's the same with, say, working on a set, indoors, or, you know, on location with a team of people in the photography experience. But I think when you're alone, just kind of wondering, it's a very, very different it's a different type of adrenaline. It's not a kind of, I don't know. It's a funny thing. I mean, I haven't really thought about it a huge amount, so I can't comment. But in terms of addictiveness, just because I think that this is really important, is that the thing I do think that is really addictive is that, and I think this is a really human thing, is that we all become obsessed by certain things, and I think those things come out and follow us through our whole lives. And with that, I want to talk about, you know, your project with Minotaur, because I think that's an obsession. I think that's an addictive thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's consciously. It's not like you're going, oh, I need to have it. It's that it just is there, and so in a sense, it's sort of like a subconsciously addictive thing.
Yeah. I agree. I think that it follows me. I think I just am fascinated by it. I think, yeah. I'm trying to think when it.
But I think that even just saying that is an interesting thing. Is that
I think
it follows you. You know, it's not something that you necessarily ever went out and
no.
Yeah.
I never I never do. I don't think I actively but I do find that I think I'm going to get very existential here. I think that we naturally want to try and draw some sort of connections between things, and I think for me, I do find that this thing keeps
popping up,
following me or engaging with me in some way. I just think it's a really I think for me, you know, going back to like ancient Greece, I think that all of those stories have always been something that I've always been fascinated by them. And yeah, I guess it does go back to the same thing with engaging with land. I think in some way that's where those stories come from. They're engaging in their surroundings and they have survived the test of time, you know, like they still fascinate us and we still engage with them now. And the Minotaur, I think that particular fascination started a number of years ago, where I knew the story, but I think it was when I was doing I was looking at a lot of parallels between artists from like the 20th century who were looking at their work is influenced by ancient Greek sculpture, text, whatever. Like all of their influences come from that classical world, and I think that's when the image started to become something that I kept going back to, because these people it's in their work. They are fascinated by this creature, and I think there's something kind of wonderfully tragic about this creature that has come from such pain and hate, and I think it's the conditioning of that where I go, well, isn't this interesting that we've turned this creature that we've created into a monster? And like, of course, I don't know, there's a part of me that you kind of ended up sort of, it's the conditioning of that. Of course it's going to be a monster if that's the conditions that it's been, if you're told you're one, you will. But I don't know. I mean, I think just generally, I think that whole story has been something that I find really fascinating. Is it very intriguing to me that it's something that we've kept going back to as humans?
I mean, I'm somewhat surprised, and of course, you know, we've obviously said, and as it says in the kind of foreword to the project, is that you know, a lot of artists have referenced it and gone back to it, but I'm sort of somewhat surprised it's not more of a known story and of a
I do too. I find it really bizarre because you go look it up. It's fucking everywhere, and I do find it quite weird that we don't, because I mean I think it has been explored by most. I do think most artists of the 20th century were exploring it in some way. I think if you studied any sort of classical text or art, you kind of can't avoid.
Absolutely.
I think at some point you've engaged in that story.
It's also
because why wouldn't you as well? Because it's a creature full, which already is I think that is also an image that you would want to play around with. It's a bull and a man. I think that is in itself tragic, and
it's very iconic. It's very, I mean, for sure, that it's known for its imagery, and you know, I mean, from memory, certainly in Australia, like all my friends at different schools got taught it, as did you know, my school, and did you got taught it at school or no?
I don't think I remember being taught it. I don't think that we did.
No.
But I read about it as a kid, and I think
I
don't think we were. I think that we were told the story of the maze.
Right.
Because I think that is the story that's the story that we were told, where the Minotaur is in the labyrinth and then gets slain.
Yeah, that's right. We got taught. Yeah.
I don't think that we were taught the story of how the Minotaur came to be, but I don't know. I think that it's something. I think all of those stories. I think that they are fascinating. I don't think they will disappear, because I think they are things that I think that they still can apply to now. I think what's the one with the father and the son who flew close to the Icarus. I find that's another one that I think is we can apply that to now. You know, flying too high, the sun. Like, it's all, they are stories that will never disappear, because they'll as long as we can love and kill, and
but
they will always exist.
Like, it's that's what I mean, exactly that as well, is that you know, Icarus is definitely more known. It's a story that
I would agree with that.
Like, you know, we say, you know, it's a saying, oh, he flew too close to the sun. You know, that's something that we use, you know, to describe somebody who's got too big of an ego or whatever. So it's interesting. I mean, you know, we when you were living here, and we got obsessed with Mindhunter, which I've just been rewatching.
Oh yes.
You know, it's funny, that same thing of you know, you could essentially say that all of the characters who are based on real people, especially the killers, are based on. And if anybody hasn't seen Mindhunter, go and watch it, maybe. But all these guys who come from these unbelievably horrible circumstances and end up being these kind of, well, for lack of a better way of putting it, a minotaur. You know, they become these creatures that we can't ever look at as human beings, because they do these kind of heinous crimes, and they're always products of really, really horrible circumstances, especially as children. And so, hence
I mean, same thing as conditioning. It goes back to the same thing. They're exploring that. They're exploring in the show.
Yeah.
How that came to be, and it's all conditioning.
Yeah. But again, that's kind of,
I mean, that's
crazy.
Interesting parallel.
Yeah.
But I think that we are fascinated by that. Surely, I think that. But this is the thing about the Minotaur for me, is that it's that he can't. He's conditioned. And he is a monster. I mean, I love the Minotaur now, but I mean, I can't escape the fact that he is a monster, and he is a beast, and he does
horrible things.
Yeah. What am I? I'm. What's it? What's the word? What's the word for, like? I'm like holding him up to be something else. What's the word for it?
Yeah, okay, now we're both going to spend the next half an hour just umming and ahhing as to what this word is.
I get it.
Like putting him on a pedestal, or
I've
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
No, I want to get the word. We could.
I honestly, I couldn't think of it. But yeah, you're not raising him up to something that he's not. You know, it's not.
He is the monster. He kills, and he, you know, I know that, but I think that I have somehow I've made it out. I've got to get this word. But okay, basically, I know he's a monster, he kills, but I think that in some way I have created this story in my mind that there is something tragic about that, but I think I feel for him in some way because he's conditioned to be that, and it's something born of sin, of lust, of betrayal, all these things. You know, I think that there is something wonderfully tragic about that, and we are obsessed with that. I mean, it's something that we are obsessed with. My God, but like, I don't know. I think I keep
a good approach
back to it. Yeah, but I think that also, yes, yeah. But it's funny to me. And this is where it has become a different thing for me. I think that's where it started. The story in itself is kind of fascinating. And then actually looking at how history has responded to that story and then the image. I think that we can now actually separate the two. I think that once that story has become ingrained enough, the image can become like you don't really need the story to go with it. I think in itself, even if you had no idea where this creatures come from, you actually can still look at it and go, right, this is a beast and a human, and there's something. I think all of those things that you would naturally that it would stir up and you would come up normally. I think that it invites that fascination, and I think with that image of that Minotaur, I think it's been something that artists they keep going back to, and it's been explored in that. I mean, the Surrealist magazine, in 1930s, the Minotaur, which was a Surrealist magazine, I mean, that says it in itself. I think they named the magazine by it, and I think that it does. I think everyone has an obsession with it. I think at some point I've seen with a lot of artists.
And they expanded the sort of field of what it meant as well. You know, even just from the very, very simple fact of using it in a surrealist magazine. You know, and it is a surreal story for sure, because it's something that, you know, we almost can't imagine. And I guess that's where it feeds into the fear factor, is that because we can't believe it to be true, it's this sort of unknown entity. And
we are obsessed with fear.
Yeah.
We're obsessed.
Yeah.
It's built in us, and it is something that is fascinating to us. And that's what I mean. Okay, like, look at it like that. This is a story that has lasted. It's like thousands of years.
Thousands of years. Yeah.
And you know, I think that this particular generation, it was the 1930s, they adopted this image as their flag almost. This was their stand. This is the stand they took and went, okay, this is where we are. We're adopting this creature as our emblem of a changing world. And I guess to them, this was a magazine that was looking at finding ways to, I guess it was a conversation on like new theoretical ways of looking at the world and trying to challenge people. I mean, surrealism in itself is doing that, but like, I think that's what this particular magazine was exploring. And I think that time, I mean, I think the fear, I mean, I think probably maybe now it can only be, no, there have been other periods where we've matched the level of fear that was in the world at that. But think about it, 1930s.
But I mean, it's interesting.
You're responding to a world. What?
Yeah. But just because, and I think it's really important to say this, is I think that's spot on what you just said. And look, I mean, by no means am I trying to push that's what our magazine does, but it's certainly the point of the magazine is that you know, things came up from the 1930s, like Minotaur did, when you just come through. You know, it's not 15 years after, or less than 15 years after the end of the First World War, in which, you know, however many, you know, millions of people died in circumstances that had never been seen before. You then had the Great Depression, which was, you know, unthinkably horrible for millions of people. And then, obviously, it preceded the Second World War, which arguably was kind of the worst of all of it. But even after that, they kept on with certain, okay, maybe not specifically Minotaur magazine, but, you know, they kept on with these kind of themes. And I think, in a way, not only, I mean, your project, but also just the times we're in now, you know, where there's not a huge amount of difference in things that are happening. And, you know, look, we're sitting in, I mean, we're doing this interview in isolation from, you know, a pandemic. I mean, it couldn't be kind of more immediate. So
yes, I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that I think there are periods in history where there is a general, like, a heightened fear in the world, in the movement of the world. And I think that in itself generates different questions, and it has to. It's fundamental that it does. And I think Minotaur is an example of a response to that. And what, like, I guess my argument is, I think that's a perfect image for that, because it is an emblem of fear. It's terrifying. It's a creature that is unnatural. So from our very human instincts, it is not right. I think that's a really interesting, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why
I think that's a really interesting way to, like, start that conversation, is like, well, then what is, and this I mean, this is a particular movement, but I think that is something that we've come back to. And then, then the war happened, and I think we came back to it again. I think it isn't something that we will step away from. But I think my how I've engaged with the Minotaur is, I think I saw that and I went, okay, look, this is interesting. This is an image that we've continued to return to, and it's because it is fear. There's something fearful about it. And I think for me, the more I looked into it, the more I went, but isn't that funny that we have things that we've given, like, there's a face to fear for different people. There are different things that mean that, but this is something that it is in some way, some sort of symbol of it. And I think that's funny, and I think that's interesting that we have created images or words or whatever to either address it or invoke it or whatever you want to do. Like, there's this dialogue that we have with fear. And I think for me, the more I looked at the Minotaur as an image of fear, it actually changed how I looked at fear, and it changed how I engaged in what fear means. And on a very personal level, I think it changed the way that I dealt with fear in my world, my small world. And I did that through painting and drawing it. But I think that it also just became how I engage with it now. I think if I'm at a period where something is happening and I'm either scared or afraid or whatever, I think actually naming that feeling, naming that human response actually has become a very interesting coping mechanism for me. I think it's, and I don't know, I'm finding it. Yeah, I find it very interesting doing that. And I think it becomes a bigger question of like, well, then what is fear to everybody? And the really human part of it, which is like, we need it, like we can't exist without it. But then so much of the time we actually let it rule us. And I think for me, it's been a really good way to never let it rule you, because I think if you face it and you give it a real, I don't know, I'd be interested to see. I think I have asked lots of people this, and like, what does fear look like to you? Most people don't know what to say, but I think more often than not, you get met with like black or like, you know, nothingness,
darkness, or
avoid darkness. That's the thing that people tend to say, or it's something like, oh, something really horrific, like a monster, or like. I think generally that is and I think that's fascinating, because I think that I think that we are most afraid of nothingness. I think we are terrified of not knowing. We are terrified of being one step behind, of not having control. I think that is something that we are terrified of as humans, certainly in this world now, where we are constantly evolving. We are constantly we're like having to catch up with ourselves. We are, don't you think?
Yeah.
And I think in that world, in that climate where we are growing at such an extreme pace, I think that it is a really, really scary thought, not having control in some way, and not keeping up with that. And of course, fear becomes this thing that you can't see. And I think for me, I actually think the scariest thing is fear, like the fear of fear. Like, that's what I get. And I think the more I thought about that, and I've actually decided to like give it a face and name it, it's become bearable in some way.
Yeah. And I guess that's probably quite a good place to sort of end, is just to say that, you know, that's obviously why we wanted it to be in the magazine, is because I think that the world is going through a period where everybody's closer, in the sense that, you know, we've got social media and tools to interact with one another, yet we've probably never ever been more polarized. And hence why, of course, we wanted your project in the magazine, but sort of every project in the magazine is exactly what you've just said, is that its intention is to question things. It's not necessarily to argue a political point of view, or I'm sure some of them do. I mean, I get reactions from them, but that it's the whole thing is sort of just a way to go, you know, these are really, really, really unusual, uncertain times. And the Minotaur, I think, perfectly represents the uncertainty, the fear, and a really great way to approach that is through what you've done, and to cope with it. So
embrace it.
and embrace it, and understand and empathize and go through a process of thinking about things rather than just reacting. Anyway, so just to say, because we've spoken about this is not going to be the last conversation between you and I.
I don't know. I'm hanging up.
I think that we will undoubtedly continue doing this, and I think I'd really like to, because I think I certainly get a lot out of it. So but thanks massively.
Thank you.
And thanks for letting us use the project as well. It's hard to put things out there without really knowing what's going on. But so we'll
hopefully it helps in some way.
Yeah, and I hope that I have no doubt that people will definitely respond to it, and we'll get a lot of sort of traction from people being interested in it. So with that being said, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody enjoyed. I don't even know how long we were talking for, but hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Cool. Well, hey, let's speak later.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Ciao.